Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking Caspa, and whether or not it is too late to start mining Caspa, right? This is probably the number one question. The number one thing that is hotly debated, right, on both sides. We've been kind of hearing that as of like even last year. Oh, it's too late, you're too late. And my opinion has always kind of been kind of the opposite. Like, if anything, there is still time, but it's just timing. And it's not going to be the same as what it was initially, right? As far as getting like ROIing in like a month, those days are definitely well beyond us. Now it's definitely a long-term game, and it's crazy to say a 6 to 8 month ROI being a long-term game, but in this market, it's different from the typical ASICs where like 18 to 24 month return is expected. In these cases, it needs to be 6 to 8 months for you to be able to do it. And in my opinion, there's still opportunity here, right? So it's not to say this is for everybody. This is for a specific crowd, specific strategies to be able to maximize it, right? Because there is a ton of risk, and we're going to talk about that, right? So we're going to talk about specifically what I am eyeing, whether I decided to buy one or not, so some of you guys already know what it is. Take a lucky guess there. But we're going to talk about the risks, we're going to talk about the pluses, we're going to talk about my overall strategy and how I kind of see it, right? Because again, this is a complicated thing, and it's not as easy as going on Mind the ASIC and going on there and even factoring certain things. You kind of have to prepare yourself for the worst, because again, with these like hype ASICs that are based on profitability versus the price of the machine, there is a ton of risk, and we're going to talk about it, right? So if that sounds good, guys, stay tuned. Let's get to this thing. So we will start off just looking at the price, and Caspa is currently holding up extremely well considering the current sentiment, which is everything is on fire. This morning, BTC dipped down to 54,000. Market was on fire, and Caspa has been holding up extremely well. Just recently hit all-time high just a few days ago at 19 cents and is down to only 16 cents. Considering what a lot of the alts have done, not only just recently, this past week, past month, but even looking at the 6 month, it's just crazy how well Caspa's been holding up. And a lot of people were complaining like, oh, it's kind of staying stagnant. Ultimately, it did have this little run up, but it's been holding up extremely well considering where a lot of the alts are currently from where they were like 3, 4, 5 months ago. Okay, a lot of them are down like 50, 60, 70%. Versus Caspa is in range of near all-time highs still, right? So it's holding up extremely well, making me even more freaking bullish, right? So now let's talk about if any of you guys are interested in getting these new ASICs, whether it's a KS0 Ultra, the KS5Ls, KS5Ms, the Bitmain units. Gonna talk about the risks first, okay? You need to heavily consider these things, okay? Gonna kind of go through them quickly because I know a lot of you guys have the heads up already, but we're gonna talk about it and just different strategies and things to consider with these specific things. Okay, so risk factor number one, the emissions reduction. So every single month, no matter what happens, we're gonna go down 5.6%, or not or, but which equates to a yearly halving. Okay, so no matter what happens with the hash rate and any of those things, it's going to go down 5.6% every month, and 12 months from today, it's going to be half of what you are currently earning, even if nothing were to change. Okay, so that is one huge thing you need to factor in. Okay, number two, and to me, this is probably the biggest one and the most variable one because we have no clue, right? So the emissions reduction, we know. We can kind of calculate that. We can factor that in. That's one thing. This is the one that has affected your yield, your profitability the most, and we have no idea to what extent it will continue to go up. Okay, we can make our best guesstimations. For me, what has worked well, like what I did with the KS3M and such, is just look at more worst case scenarios and see if it still makes sense. Okay, so we are currently at 380 petahash. For reference, right, just as of May 13th, when we talked about when the KS5 Pro price cut came, which kind of brought on all the price reductions, we were talking about expect by the time that these things ship for the hash rate to double at this point. So at this point, we're about 240, 250. So we're fully expecting by the time that the KS5s land, by the time they're plugged in, sometime in September, we're expecting 500 petahash. We're at freaking 380 already. And a lot of the KS5Ls from the first batch after the price reduction have not shipped yet. This July 1st to July 15th batch hasn't shipped yet. It's not going to ship for another few weeks. The KS5Ms have not shipped yet. After that price reduction from IceRiver, a ton of orders have happened. Okay? We're currently at 380. I would not be surprised, and not only would I not be surprised, I would fully expect before even those Bitmain units are in hand, so by August, by the time these IceRiver batches hit, for us to be at that 500 petahash level. Okay? So, like for example, what I'm factoring in is for by the time September does hit, for this to double from this point. So when I'm doing my calculations, I'm fully expecting 750 petahash. Okay, so what does that mean? That means your yield from where it's at is going to get cut in half. Okay, so this is not guaranteed. Again, this is probably more worst case scenario, but I would prepare for it. So that would mean a KS5 Pro, for example, your yield would go down from nearly 500, potentially, again, this is not for sure, but potentially I would factor in the possibility of it going down to 250 CAS a day. Okay? You need to consider that possibility. Again, is it for sure? Is it going to happen? Maybe is that too high? Potentially, right? It all depends on how you want to calculate it, right? There are calculators. People do try to factor in 15-20% increases, and to me it's not that it's pointless, it's just you're gonna have months where it potentially doesn't, right? Because we've seen that these past few months it was kind of stagnant. What caused this massive increase is this aggressive price cut, okay, from Bitmain, yes, but it's not gonna hit until later, and the IceRiver units now, right? So that's why right now we are going to have this immense increase, which is something that's hard to account for if you're just doing like 15% every month. You kind of almost have to do it on a month-to-month basis and kind of factor in what is the likelihood of that happening. And in my opinion, it's probably pretty likely. And like for me personally, again, I'm factoring in for double, and I'm factoring in by the end of the year that we're going to probably be at an exahash. I would almost be surprised if we are not. Okay, so is that pessimistic? Probably. Is that a little bit more aggressive than what it's probably going to be? Potentially, right? But that's what I try to plan for. So if I look at those scenarios and even at that point it still makes sense, then it's kind of giving me the green light in a sense. Okay, so when you're doing calculations, when you're looking at things, you need to factor in that possibility. Okay, so just consider that. So don't just look at here and be like, oh, okay, maybe we'll go up. Everybody's been saying the average has been 15%, so maybe next month we go 15%. I would be very surprised if by September we only go up like 20-25% from here. I fully expect us to be well above 500 by the time September hits, right? Again, I'm planning for maybe more aggressive, but again, I'd rather be safe than sorry. I'd rather look at it from that perspective. Okay. So risk factor number 3, and this is something that we have talked about over and over, price reductions. Price reductions is a real thing. A lot of you guys have experienced it, and it's something that's been going on from the beginning of all of this, right? It's been Bitmain and IceRiver playing this game essentially for over a year now, right? It's who's gonna cut hardest, who's gonna cut first, and it's just been over and over, okay? So is it very likely that it's going to happen from this point? Maybe, maybe not. In my opinion, most likely not, right? So, and at this point, it's a risk to reward thing. Like I've said before, as these units get cheaper, the kind of risk kind of starts to go down a little bit. Not necessarily the risk, but I guess the pain from it happening goes down in that sense. So like, for example, with the KS5L being down to $4,800, even let's say prices crash, things go horrible these next few months, and 2 months from now it goes down to $2,400. $2,400 loss isn't that big of a deal. But when it was 12K down to this price, that hurts, right? So you have to factor the possibility of those things happening. But again, as these things get cheaper and as these things get more advanced, because we're at the point now where probably pretty close to the newer gen, right, as far as chips and such go. With IceRiver, they still do have another gen to catch up, the Bitmain unit being the superior unit and probably the best unit leading into the bull market. Okay, but you definitely do have to factor that in. Again, do I realistically think it's going to get cut in half from here in the next few months? No. Is it possible that it does go down a little bit further? Sure. Do I see the KS5L going down a whole lot from here? Not as much. The KS5M, if things get kind of bearish, I could see a potential here because there is a premium for this guy because it is the more superior unit, right? Or it is the more efficient unit from IceRiver. Same thing kind of goes for the KS5, KS5 Pro. There's a premium because you're paying for the best. So is it possible that it does go down from here? Sure. Is it going to be something where it goes 50% from here? Not super likely, right? Maybe 10%, maybe something from there. Depends on how the market goes, maybe a little bit more. Who knows? But for me, considering they just went from 35K down to this price point, not super likely. And especially also because Bitmain also opened up pre-orders for an October batch at about the same price, just like literally 500 bucks less, which kind of doesn't make sense. But for me, that's more bullish as far as prices potentially not going down further, right? Because also by the time October hits, closer to the bull market also, so factor that in. So that kind of gives me more confidence that prices potentially won't go much lower from here, right? But it is something that's possible and you have to factor that in. So like for me, I'm fully mentally prepared for any of these to go 50% from here, right? Again, super likely from here just because we're timing it right after a massive drop, just like we did with the KS3M. Probably not. Again, a lot of good comparisons from the things that had me purchasing that KS3M and now, right? It was right after a big price increase and right after a big price decrease, right? Very similar situation to when I got the KS3M, which is why it has me looking at it so aggressively. Okay, but again, just factor that in. So now let's look at some of the pluses for getting some of these ASICs, right? Number one, and it's something we alluded to in the beginning, it's Caspa's price action, right? Considering all the crap going on, it is holding up extremely, extremely well, more so than some of the other alts, which is something that's not new to Caspa, right? For you guys who've been watching for a long time, this is something we talked about in a video I did like in November of 22 or November 20, yeah, November 22, we're talking about it. It was during the FTX fiasco. When we're looking at it, we're looking, and that's something I had mentioned in that video, was seemed kind of crazy how well Caspa was doing during all that crap, right? Freaking crypto was done. The FTX collapse happened, everything was on fire, and Caspa was still just up and to the right, right? And even talked about in that video that like, that alone should kind of give you signals, and it's kind of repeating here also, right? Everything is going down like crazy, and Caspa is still holding up extremely, extremely well. Okay, overall, it did dip a good amount, and also recovered fairly quickly back up to 16 cents. Again, all-time high we just hit not too long ago was 19 cents. So from 19 cents down to 16 cents. Considering a lot of the alts, how hard they've been getting hit these past few months, says a lot, right? So that's definitely one big thing. Another big factor for me, and that was something that in a lot of people's opinion was a big doom thing, was KRC20. Okay, so I know a lot of people were like, it was a flop, it was whatever. It's still in beta. It was something that it's expected and something that it just happens even on mature networks, right? If any of you guys have participated in NFT releases, NFT mints, or big expected like TGE events where a token launch, things of that sort, when there's congestion, it's like that on every network, even recently, right? With Ethereum, Solana, all of these things, right? So this is something that was fully expected. And this is why even when some of you guys asked me if I was super bullish on KRC20, I am in the long run, I am as a whole, but my thing was a lot of the people in the space, especially in the mining space, aren't familiar with these dynamics, right? So I think a lot of people's expectation was, okay, KRC20 is launching, it's going to work perfectly. No, there's a reason that a lot of these projects, even like DeFi things, they take a long time to fully go before they go to mainnet, right? So like we've been doing airdrop farming, a lot of those things have been open in that sense, they weren't on mainnet for like 6-8 months, right? They were testing all these things. It takes a long time. So I think the reason I was saying I was kind of not too bullish on it is because I think people were going to expect that, oh, KRC20 is open, it's going to work perfectly, we're going to have DeFi, we're going to have DEXs all on that same day. No, bros, it's going to be a while, right? But they are building the foundation for that, right? But don't be surprised for it to be quite a while for us to see DEXs, for us to see DeFi projects building on there. It's going to take time. So just expect that. Don't expect it to be in 2 weeks from now, like a lot of people are all doom and gloom about it. Oh, it was a flop, it was horrible. This is what the expectation should have been. And I think that's the reason I was saying I was kind of bearish on it, was just because I had a feeling that's what people were going to be expecting, because it's people who aren't familiar with that. They aren't familiar with these type of releases, with messing with these things, right? For you guys who are into the meme coins, into these things, you kind of know what to expect here, right? So, but what I am bullish on here, what gave us a little sign, was block reward increases. Okay, so you can see here the earnings from the KS3M back on June 30th. We were averaging about 150, 160, and went up to 190 that day, right? And depending on the pool, some of you guys did way better. And you guys who were solo mining and hitting these freaking block rewards did awesome, right? So you could see here that it pretty much only lasted a day, because again, they had to put a pause on it. But you can see here it was 191, 178, and then went back down to the norm the day after. So as of July 2nd, went down to 155, 153. So it's back in that range, right? But that does give me, not to say hope, but it does show that when things do start popping off, we're going to have those events, we're going to have those times where it is going to happen, right? And even if it's just enough to cover the emissions reductions, which kind of help out with that, that just makes me bullish that it's going to be more than just the base block reward, right? So something to be bullish of there. The other big thing, the other plus currently with the current market sentiment and just of the timing of things, is because number one, this big price pump that we had, hopefully we maintain this range recently, and the timing of things, because we are currently in July, right? We typically know, if we go by the 4-year cycle, what happens. Sometime by the end of this year, things start kind of like accelerating, right? As far as price action goes. So we are starting to near the point where the price reductions, which we had mentioned earlier, are probably going to start slowing down over time, right? So pretty much the past 12 months, we consistently seen these price reductions go down and down and down and down and over time. But I think we're starting to get to that point where we're not going to see that as much. Okay, number one, because of the timing. Number one, because of the price action. Number two, the timing. We're starting to get to the point where hopefully the price action starts keeping up with the drop in your yield. Okay, so your yield is definitely 100% going to continue to go down, but hopefully the price action starts kind of keeping up with it. And we kind of have seen it to an extent with the current Caspa ASICs as of these past few months, right? When we do those ASIC monthly price reviews, we kind of look at Mine the ASIC, and we've been noticing that a lot of the fiat profitability has been remaining the same. The yield has been going down, but the fiat profitability has been remaining the same just because of that price action has been keeping up with it, right? So hopefully that trend kind of starts continuing. And from here, because we're getting closer to that bull market period, it seems very likely, on top of the fact that now we should start being near towards the closer end to the more relevant chips, right? So like for me, the Bitmain unit is extremely appealing because it's probably going to be still the most efficient unit leading into the bull market. So it's probably going to be the best unit for long term, like if you're going to mine this thing for over that 6 to 8 month period. Okay, versus IceRiver technically is still a gen behind, right? So for me, because of the timing, because of this price action, because of the sentiment with Caspa, I think we're starting to get to the point where we won't necessarily see those crazy aggressive price drops in these ASICs for Caspa, okay? So that's one big thing. So like for me, that's a reason that the Bitmain unit is so appealing, just because that would be one, especially for me because I'm more limited on my electric capacity. Okay, so realistically, price per hash, it's definitely with this recent price reduction with the KS5L, especially this June batch, right? Like NHash, for example, has it at 4,400 plus 200 change shipping, so about 4,600 shipped for that July 1st to 15th batch. That's the best price to hash currently. It's beating out even the Bitmain unit, and that's what kind of we're expecting. The problem is the efficiency, right? If I were to get 2 of these, it's literally half the efficiency of the Bitmain unit. Okay, so it just kind of depends on your situation, your electric capacity, things of that sort, as far as what units to get. So like for me personally, I did actually get a KS5L, and I did also pre-order a KS5 Pro. Okay, so the KS5 Pro for me is going to be a long-term guy, so that one is gonna be with me all the way through. I still do have my KS3M, I have the KS5L and that guy, so I'm going heavy on the Caspa ASICs. The KS5L isn't necessarily a super long-term hold. That one for me might be one of those things where once it makes its money back, or if we have a gigapump and prices go up, I will probably be flipping it. If not, I will most likely be flipping it sometime in the spring potentially. Who knows? If Caspa price action keeps continuing and do what we hope it does, maybe I'll just hang on to it also. But definitely the long-term play for me is the KS5 Pro, just because again, it's the most efficient unit, right? I fully expect another generation of the IceRivers to come out, one to match this efficiency. Okay, so those are things to consider. For those of you guys wondering, I did purchase through Nhash. I do have an affiliate link with them in the description. The reason I use them is that they are just one of the cheaper stores, right? And a lot of people mention a lot of the other ones, but as far as like total price, they're one of the cheapest, and I have ordered through them before. Again, I don't do too many referral things. I do, the few that I have listed are all from places that I personally ordered anonymously. Okay, so that's one big thing, is I order anonymously. Because if I go in there saying, oh, hey, I'm a content creator for, then guess what? They're going to make sure I get my unit, because they don't want bad publicity, right? So I order it anonymously, see how it goes. If it's cool, then I'll do it, right? So for me, I did it through them. Also, a big criteria for me is to get through a more recognized store where I can get an official receipt and I have documentation of everything. Okay, you're gonna get a better price going through a direct seller. So if you go through like T-Swift, for example, he's going to have the best price always, right? For me though, a requirement is to go through a store, is to get an official receipt, just because I know my financials are going to get more scrutinized than your typical person. So if in your fiat job, you have a type of job where you know you go through frequent background checks that are very invasive in a sense, it's a lot easier to explain the situation when you have a receipt, when you have a store. It's a lot easier to explain than a snapshot of a Telegram chat and a transaction hash. So for me personally, and if you were to get audited, anything of that sort, if you like write off your units, which I do as well, right? But for me, just an official store with an official receipt is just a lot easier to explain than that. So like for me, for example, I'll pay a couple extra $100 to get it from this, right? So to each their own, everybody has their own thing, different requirements, but I've had good success with Nhash, right? So enough of that, right? So now let's go to the strategy here, right? So obviously did disclose I did purchase these units, right? So there is a lot of risk though. This isn't something I purchased like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna get my money back. It's like we mentioned in the beginning, there is extreme risk. Any of these high basics that are like overpriced and such, there is a ton of risk. But to me, the risk to reward currently where things are at, it still makes sense. But let's talk about why. Number one being your strategy. For example, my strategy, and the only strategy that makes sense if you're going to get in this late in the game, is if you're going to mine and hold. If your strategy is to mine and sell and pay your electric, this is probably not the best thing. Reason being is that in this case with Caspa specifically, you need to essentially get your yield in those first 6 to 8 months to be successful. This is not a typical ASIC venture where, oh, it's an 18 to 24 month ROI. This is not that. This is something where, in my opinion, the only reason I would do it is if you're going to follow that strategy. Okay, so you need to consider that fact. Like, so for me, because that's what I am doing, this is why I'm comfortable taking this risk, and because of my conviction level with Caspa. Okay, it's pretty high. I'm very comfortable with it being that big chunk of my bag, right? So it's all those things kind of combined. Okay, number two is the way I look at my ROI. I don't necessarily do it like what people do, and this is something that a lot of people do. I'll do a video kind of talking about a little bit more deep, but I don't necessarily factor in just that one unit, right? I'm not calculating the return on investment on just one unit. I'm using the rest of my hash rate, the rest of my miners, everything as a whole to kind of help ROI, to help recoup that cost essentially. Like for example, the KS3M has done extremely well, and that's going to continue to yield. It's going to continue to help making this return on the investment. Okay, for example, for you guys following, this has all been from the KS3M. The break even was at 61,000 Caspa, whatever. It's currently at 74,000, right? Which we were to punch it in, and this is not even factoring. It's actually a little bit higher than that because I've mined on Hero miners for a little bit. It's probably closer to like 77,000, somewhere around there. But even factoring that amount in, it's brought in over $12,000, right? At work, Caspa's prices currently, back when it was, because when I purchased it, Caspa's price was about 12 cents. So that's why break even was about 60,000 Caspa or so, right? So this one's still going to continue to generate revenue, and it's going to continue to help recoup the investment costs of these other guys. And same thing with the KS5L, and that's why I kind of did get the KS5L as a hedge, just in case the KS5 from Bitmain gets delayed further, right? That's another potential, right? We're pre-ordering these things well ahead of time. It does say it's going to ship in August, but as we've seen like with the IceRiver units and even Bitmain also, that typically means it's going to start shipping at the end of August. So potentially shipping as late as the last week of August, and that's why realistically a more realistic date is getting it sometime mid, potentially even late September, and that's if they're on time. That's not factoring in potential delays, or let's say another freaking marathon type freaking farm orders 10,000 units and they get first dibs and we get pushed back. That's also possible, right? So that's why I kind of in a way hedged with that KS5L so I can start hashing now just in case that guy does get pushed out farther out. Okay, so that's another thing you have to factor in. The other thing I'm factoring in is just the fact that I focus on yield. Okay, so this is me personally, this is my point of view on it. All these things, as a matter of fact, is just the way I look at it. I'm not necessarily saying that, oh yeah, definitely buy this, do this, and this is how you got to look at it. This is just how I look at it, right? And this is why I decided to purchase what I did. So the way I look at it is I focus on the yield and what that yield will potentially be worth come the bull market. Okay, so I'm not looking at current profitability. Like I don't necessarily really care at all about daily profitability unless it's at a significant loss, which I don't see that being the case with Caspa for quite a while. Okay, so I could care less what this is making now. What I care about is what this is going to be worth in the bull market. So like my target price, for example, in my opinion, is fairly conservative at 50 cents. Okay, so if this thing is yielding 500 Caspa a day, I'm valuing that, or I'm seeing that as $250 a day. Okay, so that's why I'm fully aware that yes, it's going to go down drastically, right? Even the KS5 Pro, even combining them, combining the KS5 Pro, the KS5L, and the KS3M, realistically right now it'd make about 900. I'm fully expecting that to go down to potentially as low as 300 casts between the three of them by the end of the year. Fully possible, right? And even like going on a few months from there, going down to, let's say it goes down to making a freaking 100 casts a day, right? Even at that point, if I'm valuing that Caspa at 50 cents a Caspa, which again to me is extremely conservative, even yielding 100, that's still 50 bucks a day, right? Even if you value it, let's say at $1 a Caspa, it's 100 bucks a day still. Okay, so for me, that's why even long term, even kind of more worst case scenario, and I don't necessarily recoup the amount of fiat, like I feel confident about that price action. Okay, so like that's why for me, it makes sense. Okay, so I'm fully aware that I may not recoup the amount of cash, but it might have made more sense to buy the coin. But for me, it's worth the risk of the potential that I feel like I'm going to recoup that and then some. Okay, also got to factor in how much yield I make between now and when I may potentially sell that KS5L and what I can sell that KS5L for. Okay, and same thing with that KS3M. Okay, like for example, right now, it makes no sense to sell that thing because of how much it's currently making right now, right? Fair market value based on the value of these others would probably be about 2,500 bucks. Does it make sense to sell an ASIC for 2,500 bucks that is yielding this much a day? Okay, as a matter of fact, I don't even think that's correct. How many does it say it's yielding right now? About 140 CAS. Okay, just give or take around there. Okay, does it make sense to sell an ASIC 2,500 bucks if it's making this much a freaking day? No, not at all. And again, if the value of Caspa continues to go where we think it goes, even if that amount of yield goes down, I do feel fully comfortable that in another 3 months or so, if we get the price action we're expecting, or even a little bit beyond, I'll probably still be able to get the 2,500 bucks for it that it's worth now, but I'll make all this yield until then. And same thing with the KS5L, right? I'm paying that amount now, but I'll be able to make a good amount, and then whatever I can sell that unit for on top of that. Okay, even if like shit hits the fan, or I decide I want to go somewhere else, I still see that also. So you have to factor in that not only am I getting that yield, like for example, the KS3M, for example, I can actually just sell it now, and I've already made the nearly over 75,000 Caspa, and then I can still sell it right now for 2,000 and buy another $2,000 worth of Caspa if I wanted to, right? So it's, you have to factor in that hardware price also, right? So that's why for me, even looking at the worst case scenario, looking at all that happening, it still makes sense, right? And then just the way I look at it also is I'm looking at it from my farm as a whole. I'm not just ROIing that one unit. Like technically, if I was really worried about that, I can mine with all my ASICs for that month, sell all that profit or all that yield for the month, and then pay this thing off in 2 months if I was super worried about it, which I'm not. So that's why also, as you grow, it gets easier to expand from that perspective, right? And that's why a lot of us, I know a lot of people are feeling FOMO, like, oh man, you're buying all these. It's because we've been growing to this point. Like if this was my first or second ASIC, or if this was 2 years ago, hell to the no, would not be considering spending even $5 grand on an ASIC. Would be a hard pill to swallow, right? But because we did take those risks in the past, right? A year and a half with like the K7 and all the others, those have panned out, or with our buys, a lot of those risks we took did pan out. It allows me to take more risk. And even again, even if with these purchases it flops, it's perfectly fine. I still have a nice size bag of Caspa, as well as my other ASICs, as well as all my other holdings. Like I'm willing to take on that risk. So that you have to understand that a lot of us have been building to this point. Okay. And also understand that I'm a small miner. I'm not getting these units. I purchased these units full price. I did not get a discount. These are not review units. These are not anything. Okay. So this is from that perspective also. I know a lot of, sometimes people hate on the, you know, the bigger guys, like, oh, well, they're just getting them for free. It's like, well, they worked for it also. They've been building to that point also. It's not like they just started a YouTube channel yesterday and they're getting all these things for free. It's they've put in the work. They've been growing, right? They've been taking advantage of this time of growing. Like mine has been since the GPU days. I've just gradually been expanding, and it allows you to take these kinds of risks. Okay, so just factor that in when you're considering these things. Okay, so it's big purchases, right? But I feel confident what it is, right? I'm looking at it worst case scenario. For me, it makes sense. It's not something where I'm overstretching myself and like, oh, I gotta, if it goes down, if this, even this guy goes down to freaking 6K next month, oh well, so be it. Long-term wise, to me, it's still going to make sense if Caspa's price action does what it does. Right? But if Caspa flops and something happens, it gets hacked, and next month or next year it goes to 0, then it freaking went to 0, right? What are you going to do at that point? You can't do anything about it, right? Or if the hash rate, instead of doing a 2 or 3x, it freaking goes up 4, 5, 6x. It is what it is. It's happened. I would consider it. I don't think it's going to go that high, but my plan is still in place. And that's why hopefully the plan is to try to yield as much as I can these next 6 to 8 months. Hopefully it should make its return by then, and then it's all gravy, right? And then I'll expand from there. I'll see what I else I cycle to, or if I continue to hang on to these, beyond the bull market. I don't know. Like, the only one for sure for me that's going to be well into the bull market is going to be this guy, just because it's the most efficient currently. Will they release a KS7 in the spring of next year? Possibly, right? I'm factoring that in also. Is it possible it's twice as efficient? Also possible. But I'm still good with my purchase now, because I know even if that were to happen and Caspa's price action goes up, guess what? That thing's going to be freaking 50K like when these things were released. Okay, so that's why, like, every kind of scenario I bring up, it still makes sense. So that's why for me, right, I'm not telling you to purchase these things. I'm not even recommending, right? As a matter of fact, you guys saw from the negatives, it's not a good thing for the majority of people. For me, because of my level of conviction with Caspa, because where I'm at position-wise, it's a risk I'm perfectly fine taking. And it's a risk you have to be okay. Like, if you're okay with the potential KS7 in the spring, with the hash rate going up 4 or 5x from here, with this thing going down to 6K next month, if you're okay with the possibility of all of that, then it can make sense to purchase that, right? At this level, right? This is obviously not for like the K0 Ultras or the little $1,000 things, but this is something to consider with any of these units, right? So if you're okay with all of that, then you can give yourself the green light. Okay, so are those things likely to happen like we explained? I don't think so. Like, I don't think this thing's gonna drop to that extent. I don't think the hash rate's gonna go up no freaking 5-6%, maybe double, maybe triple. I would expect the triple by the end of the year. But those are all things that I'm kind of thinking about ahead of time, right? Hopefully it doesn't get to that extent. So I was kind of hoping, like, a big part, I was hoping for like an lithium ASIC or something at these conferences, was so some of the attention can get diverted to that ASIC, because we're gonna see a repeat of we saw here with that eventual lithium, with that eventual radiant ASIC. So I was hoping those would come out to get some of the attention off of Caspa, so maybe that would kind of even reduce the likelihood of those hash rate increases, right? But didn't happen, at least not yet. Wouldn't be surprised to see it anytime in these next few months though, right? I'm sure we'll see it, and we'll see one get dropped, and don't be surprised to see the others come right after, because I'm sure they are in production now and they're just trying to stock up, right? Don't be surprised to kind of see that out of nowhere, where IceRiver makes an announcement and then Gold Shell right after, Bitmain right after. Like, just don't be surprised to see that either, right? Because we know it's very likely that it's happening right now in the background. Okay, so just wanted to give you guys an update. Again, this is not a video to say, oh yeah, definitely get this Caspa ASIC. It's gonna be, this is a reality check, and this is just my perspective, right? These are the things that literally I took into consideration when making these purchases. Right, so I just like to share these things so you guys can get that perspective, get the mindset, and just things to factor in if you are thinking about getting any of these, right? So let me know in the comments, guys. Did any of you, oh, actually, I shouldn't even ask. I know a lot of you guys ordered those KS5Ls, and the pricing is extremely attractive, right? So I do not blame you at all. Let me know if any of you guys ordered the KS5s or 5 Pros or the KS5Ms. That one was also pretty intriguing. That one I was very tempted to pull the trigger and end up just getting the KS5L just because the price to hash is so good, right? It's hard to turn down. Even some of the smaller ones, like the KS0 Ultra, after that price reduction, extremely appealing. I will likely be picking some up just because, again, my son got the freaking mining bug after mining disrupt. I took him with me, and he's like all about it now, so probably getting some of those. Even the K Box Pro is starting to get appealing just because the density factor is just 1 unit, and even on Nhash it's under $1,000 now, and they have it at $9.99. So a lot of deals to be had. How long will they last? Who knows? With the current price action, will they go lower? Also possible. So factor these things in, guys. But again, let me know in the comments, guys, what you guys are doing. Thank you for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Please comment, like, subscribe, guys, and we are out.